Good evening and welcome to Kinoteka. In tonight's Kontraplan, we are dealing with the phenomena that from its novelistic inception in 1965 spanned across time and media, right to the present state of unavoidable modern myth, rejuvenated again and again through various adaptations. Dune by Frank Herbert generated sequels and prequels, movies and TV series, board and video games, countless inspirations in science fiction writing and drawing, as well as the greatest film never made, whose unfortunate yet influential fate was presented to us through tonight's screening. Both Frank Herbert and Alejandra Jodorowskog roamed through the desert, but although Holy Mountain and El Topo are timeless cult classics, it was Herbert who emerged from the desert as one of those instantly recognizable names of the Western culture. And all because he stumbled upon a publisher of car manuals. It is my great pleasure to welcome our guests tonight, Ms. Riva Zmajoki, science fiction and fantasy writer, philosopher and sociologist. Please give her a round of applause.
Hello.
And Mr. Frank Pavich, director of Jodorowsky's Dune. Please give him a round of applause. He cannot see you, but he can hear you. And I'm Silvestar Mileta, your host for tonight, film critic. So, although we plan, thank you, thank you. Although we plan to touch on both Jodorowsky's Dune and Denis Villeneuve's Dune, of course, we are planning to talk a little bit about it. I would like to start first with some personal questions. So I would like to ask my guests tonight how you first got acquainted with Dune universe, and can you remember what were your first impressions when you got in touch with Dune universe, be it through film, be it through novel. Riva, shall we start with you?
Thank you. I came to know Dune through Lynch's movie. It was the first thing I saw of Dune, and it was marvelous. I didn't see any flaw in it, and I was unaware of any criticism that it came with it, because I was still a preteen, I think. It was shown on television over and over, and whenever it came, I would watch it, but the only thing I had problems with was the style of Baron Harkonnen, and whenever he was in screen, I was like blocking him from view. And that made me to go and to read the book. And when I read the book, I fell in love completely and read everything Frank wrote about Dune, and it was marvelous. I fell in love instantly.
Okay, Frank, what about you? Your first contact with the Dune universe?
My first contact with the Dune universe was through Jodorowsky. The first I had heard of Dune. When I was a kid, when the David Lynch movie came out, I was probably 10 or 11 years old, and I wanted to go see it in the movie theater, but my mother would not let me. So I didn't get to see David Lynch's Dune until many years later. But my first real experience with Dune was Jodorowsky. I had read about his version of Dune, and that sort of opened me up to everything. Once I got involved with the documentary, then I started to read the book. So I guess I'm kind of like Jodorowsky in that way, that I didn't read it until later.
Okay, so to follow up on the last question, obviously Dune informed both of your professional lives in this way or another, or at least part of it. So Riva, can you tell us a little bit about how specifically Herbert inspired your work? You are doing an independent publishing venture through Amazon, and you are building a complete alternate universe or the future history universe that maybe is in some way inspired by Herbert.
Well, I can't deny that reading Herbert so early in my life made me much more ambitious as a writer than I would be if I started with something small. And I must say that I'm just ambitious to create a universe that has a coherent sense and that it's a bit different than we are used to seeing in sci-fi. And I did read a lot of sci-fi, so Asimov, Le Guin, and Herbert were just the basis of everything I read later on. And it's the nature of sci-fi. Because all of the sci-fi, like we saw in the documentary, is informed by the authors that came before us. And the authors that came before us gave us ideas, and we are building upon the shoulders of giants, and they were our originals, and we are just playing in their sandboxes. Because everything that is created in the interplay we have with each other, and everything that happens before us is a part of our experience, and not to dip in it and not to take from it. It's just like, why would you start from scratch when you have such marvelous inspiration before you to create something that wasn't seen before? And I don't know, ambition, I would say.
And I guess world building, because I think Herbert excels in world building.
Yes,
which
he's
is one
excellent
of the,
at that. I adore his world building, and I didn't find that anywhere else. And I think that I'm more informed by him in world building because I wanted to experience that again, and I didn't find it anywhere, so I had to create it for myself.
I see, thank you. Frank, what about you? Since Jodorowsky was your first contact with the Dune, how you got personally acquainted with the guy, and what motivated you to at least momentously switch from the musical documentaries and other subjects to Dune? What can you tell us about what were the main challenges of your film with Jodorowsky, and how is he private? How is he like a private guy? I mean, apart from the fact from everything we saw in the film.
Like I said, I really, I was drawn to make this film because his movie sounded so amazing. I mean, when I read, when you compare, when you combine Alejandro Jodorowsky, when you know his movies, when you know El Topo, when you know Holy Mountain, and then you say, oh, he was going to do Dune 10 years before Lynch, and his cast was going to be, Orson Welles, Salvador Dali, Pink Floyd doing the music, all of that. I mean, it was just too incredible. It was too incredible. And there was not very much information available online or in books or anything. So I wanted to learn more. I had learned just these little things, but I wanted to learn the full story. So I said, well, maybe the best way to learn about it is to tell the story, is to make a documentary. And that way I can learn. And if I'm interested, maybe, maybe other people are as well. So I didn't know him. I just contacted him out of the blue. And I found an email address for his agent, or somebody who said they were his agent. I don't even know if it was real. And I sent them an email. I said, is it true that you represent Alejandro Jodorowsky? And I sent the email. I never thought I would hear back. And a couple of weeks later, I woke up one morning and I opened up my computer and there was an email, not from the agent, but from Alejandro Jodorowsky himself. And I was so scared. I was terrified to open the email because I had this dream, like Alejandro, right? I had this dream to make this movie. And if I opened the email, maybe the email just said no. Or maybe it said, I don't want to make it with you. Or maybe the email would say, oh, I just started making it last week with somebody else. So I wanted to live in a world where I was going to make the documentary. So I didn't read the email for a week. And I just walked around pretending that I was good friends with Alejandro Jodorowsky. And then I made the movie. And then after a week, I said, okay, I have to grow up. I have to open the email. And I opened the email and it was very short. And it just said, I understand you're looking for me and you want to make a documentary about Dune. You need to come to Paris and we need to meet in person. We need to meet face to face. And that's sort of how the whole adventure began, I guess.
And how was your work process with him? Was he cooperative? Was he, like a heavy guy or?
No, I thought that he was going to be, like you say, a heavy guy, especially because when he makes his movies, he does everything and nobody can tell him anything. So here I am, this nobody, coming to him to make this documentary. I thought that he would always be over my shoulder. and saying, don't do that, do this. And I thought that he would want to see things. But, when he makes a movie, he wants to be free. He doesn't want anybody over his shoulder. And he gave me the same chance and the same respect. And he never bothered me it took us 3 years to make it, or 2.5, 3 years to make it. And he never bothered me. He never demanded to see something or to change something. The first time he saw the movie was at the Cannes Film Festival when it premiered. So he didn't see it before. He had nothing. He just sort of let me go with it, which I really, I'll be forever grateful for, that he gave me that freedom. I think that was a really big, I think that helps to show who he is, that he's not the kind of person who, wants the freedom for themselves, but won't give it to anybody else. And, he gave me this gift of this very important story, it's important for us because, it's such an amazing story, but it's important for him because it's so personal. It's a painful thing for him. It's an incredibly painful experience. And he shared it with me and he let me tell it. And that's, what else can you say about somebody, who lets you do that? That's just, he's an incredible person. He's scary. Don't get me wrong. He's scary and he's crazy, but in a good way, I guess,
Okay, thank you. So one of not the reasons, but the motives we are here tonight is obviously Denis Villeneuve's adaptation of Herbert's novel. So to address this elephant in the room, let us comment a little bit on that one. My problem, and very personal problem, with Villeneuve's version of the events of the story is the fact that I privately expected it to actually be Jodorowsky's Dune, or to actually be an attempt to make that film. To elaborate a little bit, I expected something visually more extravagant, something that would be more in line with the rich audiovisual heritage of dealing with the story in the past decades, okay? And I got something different. I got something that is very, at least for me, in line with these contemporary trends of a little bit desaturated, naturalistic, grained image, something that even a little bit suppressed Villeneuve's strong points in his previous movies, like depth of field shots, higher angle shots, long shots, So, but in a vacuum, speaking in a vacuum, I think that this adaptation is a worthy one. It's a decent adaptation, and it's a well-made film. It's just that I expected something completely different. I don't know, what do you think about Villeneuve's film, Riva?
I would call it Dune for beginners. And I think it's a great movie to ease you in the universe, because you will expect that you will enter a normal universe. And you will be surprised with each step of the way you take further. But my only concern is that it's not engaging and provocative enough to make people read Dune. Because I think that the goal of any decent adaptation should be to make people read the book. Because every good book I discovered was discovered through a movie that was interesting enough and provocative enough, but not quite understandable. And I would go and find a book to make things clear for myself. And I think that this movie may left you feeling like you know Dune, like there's not enough mystery. That's my take.
Okay, Frank, what about you?
That's an interesting perspective. I've never thought of that you would go see a movie and then read the book, as sort of like a way to read the book.
I'm a reader first. My first and foremost thing is reading. So I'm always in a search of a good book. It's nice to get a nice movie, but if you get a good book and it has sequels, it's the best thing ever.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess if I were to argue that, I would say maybe Villeneuve's version is more successful because it doesn't leave you questioning things. I think it does leave you questioning things because nothing is really explained. You know, there's all these crazy people in these masks, even right from the beginning. So you don't understand the whole world. But it's not, to me, it's not, it didn't leave me wanting, it left me wanting more, but it didn't leave me lacking anything. Even the way I thought that he, you know, it's half the book, you know, obviously. And even the way he ended it, you know, he made it that way. And if the movie was a failure, he wouldn't get to make, you know, the second half.
True.
And it was a success, so he will get to make the second half. But even if he didn't, to me, it would stand alone in its own, you know, as its own movie. And if you can imagine, oh, what would happen when they, you know, go on to the next thing. But, you know, but I know that you are a diehard Frank Herbert fan. So,
yes,
you know.
it does stand alone because Herbert did compose his first book as 3 books. So it does end on the just behind the ending of the first book. So it does function as a story in itself. That's what people forget, that the first book was published as 3 books in the beginning, and still when it's published you see sections, and each part functions as a story in itself.
Right. I mean, I went to go see it, you know, I went to go see it opening day, first screening, first showing of the day, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was great, because in the afternoon there's nobody there. It was me and 6 people. It was, you know, the best experience. And I personally loved it because I had 0 expectations. Like, I didn't expect him to make a Jodorowsky movie, and I didn't have my own, you know, I don't have my own visions of Dune, you know, so strongly that I felt like it's hard to live up to those things. If you're expecting a Jodorowsky movie and you don't get it, that's disappointing. And if you're expecting what you're imagining from reading all the novels for years and you don't get that, that's disappointing. But I had none of those expectations. I went in just to say, what's it going to be? And I was shocked. To me, I was shocked at how successful it was. I mean, this is a guy that he did it twice, right? He did it first with Blade Runner. Like, that movie had no right to be successful or to be good. And he made, you know, I don't know if it was that successful, but to me it was something, you know, he really made his own thing from it. He made something incredibly unique. And that's, every odd was against him. And then with Dune, as everybody knows, all the odds are against you, all the different adaptations, all the failures, all these things. And he came out with something successful, which I feel also had emotion. You know, I feel that the acting, I think, you know, the actors, I feel really grabbed me in a certain way.
I would think that people will probably resent me, but I would argue, I know that they will resent me because I watched enough reviews of Dune from fans, diehard fans like myself, and I would argue that this poll is the best poll we got so far. Because people are arguing that the poll was weak, but I would say he's most in line with the book poll than any poll before, even the series one, because he captured the emotion, that thin line between doubt and the utter surety that Paul has, because the whole book of Dune is about Paul's inner struggle to accept his terrible purpose, which he does in the end, but the doubt makes him this character that is always on the verge. Is he the God Messiah, or is he a doubting human?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this may be the right moment to include the audience in the discussion, if they are willing. If you have any questions, comments, for now, you will have other chances, but maybe take this first one. Anyone would like to comment? Na hrvatskom je isto u redu. Ima? Ne. Aha, pardon. Izvolite. There is no travel mic.
Okay, so no problem. I have a question for Frank. First of all, thank you for the film and for the talk. What was the most difficult thing to talk about with Jodorowsky? Was he apprehensive when discussing his potential failures, did he see them as failures because the movie ultimately didn't get made?
Okay. Frank, did you hear that?
I did. It was a tough, touchy situation. I think that enough time had passed in between the collapse of his Dune and me, knocking on his door. Where I think that he had, enough time had passed where he could come to terms with it, and he could see. I still think that there's pain. I still think that he's scarred from it, but I think that he sees it in a more positive way now. But he was the only, like, as I said before, he left me alone, and let me be free to do the movie. The only sense that I got from him was that he had a fear that I would tell the story in a negative way. Look how horrible this is. Look at this failure. And he was worried that I would do that. If I did that with the film, that people would think that that's how he views it. When he doesn't, he truly, even though it hurts him, he still says, look what I did. I didn't die. I made this book and I made this movie, and all these people, everybody I worked with had careers, and then we changed the world. And I think he really believes that. So what I thought would be the most difficult thing to speak to him about really was not an issue at all, because he was so positive, because he had such a good perspective on things.
Because he was fortunate. He made his art to blossom in other mediums. Yes. And that's the greatest fortune for an artist. We do one thing thinking that it will succeed, but if we manage to transform it into something else than we set out to do, it's all right. I set out to be a poet, and I am a failure in that regard. But that is the part of my writing as well, because if you manage to use that same drive in another medium, it's all right. Every failure is just another step on your way. And I think that the movie portrayed that journey beautifully.
And I've sort of thought about it later on, and I sort of realized that it's not even a failure if you look at it, because they came up with these ideas, they did all the work on paper, they have all the drawings, they created this thing, and they never shot any film. Had they started filming the movie, let's say they went to the desert, and let's say they filmed for a day, or an hour, or a week, or a month, and then the film was canceled, that would be a failure, because they would have all this film that they shot, but they couldn't do anything with it. But this way, it's not a failure, because it ended at exactly the moment that it was supposed to. And it ended right at the moment where we can hear about it, look at the images in the book, close our eyes, and imagine what it would have been, truly. So it really, I do think that he's sort of a magician, and he's created this, this thing, I think,
I would argue, if I may, the documentary, I saw it first just right now, and it struck me really. It showed that they did create an artistic moment. They didn't create a movie, but the process itself, the collaboration, those people spending time together at that moment was an art moment. It was a piece of art in itself, and its mere existence, the fact that it happened, that collaboration, all those meetings, or those magical moments, is a thing that created the later masterpieces. Sure. And if that movie was created on all that art used only on that one picture that would be flawed because of the technology of that time, it would not seep through to all other films like it did.
Yeah, it was certainly at least intermediary influential through storyboard, but also through artists who were there and who continued to work in the science fiction cinema and in comics and all around. Yeah. Did you have any other question? No, okay, thank you. Anyone else for the moment? Questions, comments? Yes? Za koga? Za Franka, budemo ja, ok.
Pa zanima me zapravo u razgovorima sa... U razgovorima sa Jodorowskim, da li je osjetio da li postoji kakva šansa da se ta knjiga na kraju objavi, ta knjiga storyboarda i crteža, ili misli zapravo da bi objavljivanjem te knjige to bio kao neki dodatni neuspjeh, odnosno priznanje neuspjeha, da bi ta knjiga možda bila kao neki neugodan spomen ako se objavi. Zanima me da li postoji ta mogućnost.
Okay. So, was Jodorowsky at any point considering publishing the storyboard, and what was his stance toward it?
You know, both Alejandro and Michel Sardou were very interested to publish, and I would say not were interested, but are interested to publish that book. And they've met with publishers. They met with Taschen, who's the biggest art publisher, I guess. They've met with all these companies, and they had issues with Mobius's wife, because in France has very specific laws when it comes to art. So even though Mobius was paid as an employee to do all the drawings, he still retained the rights to them. And now that he died, the rights transferred to his wife, and she has blocked all of their efforts to put the book out. So they've tried and failed again. But I don't know if you saw, I think you know that there was a copy sold today. Did you see what it sold for?
It's $28,000, I think.
Oh, no. They estimated between 25 and 35,000 euros. It went for 2.6 million euros.
So, Mattia, if you're interested.
Yeah, I mean, I still, I was watching it live on the internet today. I still can't believe it. It's a copy of a book that sold for 2.6 million euros.
People love to own art.
I guess. I'm still confused. I don't know.
Luckily, I think that Mobius, incorporated some of his drawings in his comics, like Inkal. Know, so maybe you can own it for a little less money, just a little bit of that. Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions for the moment? Okay, no. I would like to go back a little bit to Villeneuve and relationship both with Herbert and with Lynch's movie. Because if there is objectively speaking, a missed opportunity about Villeneuve's film that I registered is the fact that the book it was classical in a sense. When it appeared in the 1960s, those were the years of the new wave science fiction writing that was very experimental, and comparatively Herbert was classical. But his book was a very much polyphonic book in the sense of a multitude of voices that it had. It was very much layered. It covered such a wide variety of possible subjects and allegories, let's say. For example, I wrote it down, just to name few of them: environmentalism, indigenous people, feudalism and capitalism, money, resources, oil, Cold War, with possible references to different crisis areas and proxy wars, family saga, religion, with references to Arab culture and Islam, charismatic leadership, war, fanatism, love, betrayal, eugenics, cloning, logic, mysticism, colonialism, imperialism, drugs, and so on and so forth. I didn't see such a multitude of subjects, points of view, and so on in the movie. Now, on the other hand, what I saw from the point of the story, I'm not speaking about the style and the form, was something that was very reminiscent to Lynch for me. You know, when looking at the story, basically, minus the emperor, minus the guild, plus the Sardaukars and some other marginal things, the story was told pretty much like Lynch did it, and we shall remember that Lynch's script was maybe the most critically panned thing about his film, most critically panned aspect of his film. So I don't know what are your thoughts about it. And to follow up on that, what aspects of the book do you personally find most interesting?
That are many questions in one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I tend to do that.
But first, what the new Dune did, I won't try to say his name. I don't have practice. They tried to make, they made small changes, but those small changes affected the story and probably how the viewers who are not familiar with the book didn't get from Lynch. And those small details are hard to spot if you're not like really invested. And the main difference is Paul. They tried to make Paul a hero, and they tried to make him more engaging for the audience. And they made a few small scenes where he states his motivation, where we see him learning, and where he states what is his plan. And in the book itself, we don't know his plan until it's done, even if we see his thoughts, and that makes him a really passive hero. And I think that's the biggest challenge that was in creating Dune as a movie people, a general audience can watch, because Paul was not enough of a leader and enough of a character, because Paul in the book is a victim of his circumstances. He's a victim of Bene Gesserit, he's a victim even of his father. And in the movie, they're trying to make him more of a hero. And I think that is the main point where this Dune works for the audience and makes a splash on the box office, because I think because they toned it down. Lynch may be criticized for the script, but I think his failure was the grotesque. Mm-hmm. People didn't have stomach for it, especially on the big screen. I wouldn't watch that on the big screen.
Okay. Frank, your thoughts?
You know, I don't know how. I'll take your word for it that Lynch's script was criticized, but that just reminds me of the story that I heard. I don't know if it's true. Who knows what's true? But apparently he would be out. You know, first of all, Lynch was a guy who he was just like Jodorowsky, right? He had made 2 tiny little films. He made, Eraserhead and The Elephant Man, and then Dino De Laurentiis said, "You're the guy to make Dune. Let's get 1,000 crew members and shooting in the desert." He was not the right guy for it. It's a very specific person to do that. But anyway, he would be out there. They'd be shooting. They'd be behind schedule, of course, because it's such an insane process to make that kind of movie. And the stories I heard is that Dino De Laurentiis would come to the set. He would see that they were behind schedule. He would take the script. He would rip out 10 pages and say, "Now you're back on schedule." So how can you succeed? How can you make sense of anything when that's, what you're up against?
Then Jodorowsky was right. It was the producer, not the director.
Exactly. Because Jodorowsky, he put himself in the shoes of David Lynch. He saw them as contemporaries, as equals.
And we have to take into consideration that this Dune will have 6 hours or more. So they will have more screen time to say the story, and they will have time to tell it visually, not just to hop through it.
To follow up, so the script was criticized. The Lynch script was criticized both by critics, but also by the fans of the novel, like yourself. On the other hand, TV series that appeared in 2000 and 2003, they were lauded. They were, welcomed when they appeared. They even got some Emmys, and fans were very much satisfied with it. I think that maybe nowadays the series, both series, are largely forgotten. Now, why that may be the case? I recently reviewed the first series and Lynch, and I thought that despite the grotesque, or in spite of grotesque, Lynch's visuality or visual approach, it gets old. It's not how do I say it? It's still fresh for me. Yeah, it's memorable. It's not so much reliant on the computer effects. It's more reliant on the traditional special effects, and so for me it still functions. On the other hand, the series used very early computer graphics that nowadays looks very dated. And on the other hand, precisely the fact that TV series kept to the book much more precisely than Lynch did was a problem for me in this adaptation.
It is a problem because the book is not interesting because of its plot. The book is interesting despite of its plot. The plot of the Dune is boring because everyone has foresight. Everyone knows what everyone else is doing, and everyone can counter your move. And in the end, it's not a chessboard game. It's just like 3 moves on the board, and everything else is computed in the head. And so when you transcribe that to the screen too faithfully, you can't describe the philosophy of it, the emotions of it, the building anxiety that gets you through the novel. I just read it for today's session, and it's the anxiety and the build-up of the philosophy and the strangeness of their religion. Because I think the main problem for me with New Dune is the Christianity imaginary. They try to portray Paul as a Messiah in our sense of the word. When in their world, Messiah is the fittest one, the most murderous one, the most relentless one, and the one who has no mercy at all. And it's the survivor, because it's the universe that is based on the medievals, and the universe where you have stripped all your rights, where there's no free will, you are owned by your baron, and equally by Lord Duke Atreides, like Baron Harkonnen, both owned their worlds and their people. And in that world, the Messiah is the ultimate tyrant. So to try to drag Paul into our world and equal him with the Messiah, how we see it, is a big mistake. And I hope that they won't go that way in the sequel. Please don't.
That's a very interesting point, because if I remember correctly, when the first novel appeared for the first time, this messianistic complex, or the point of Messiah, was precisely something that was often misunderstood. It got better with the sequels, obviously, because it put it in a larger perspective. And one point about Villeneuve that I like is the fact that through his precognitions, visions, we get some of this context of being Messiah in this world from the sequels. I actually like that.
Yes, that's visible in the Messiah of Dune, where Paul is old and he abdicated his throne and he's wandering streets as a beggar, because he lost his Chani. I'm sorry, spoilers. So sorry, not intentional. If you have a YouTube channel, just insert spoilers before this. But the point is that many people got enraged with Herbert for it. And he was, we must understand that he was at most a journalist, a political journalist, and he wrote Dune as a cautionary tale to beware of charismatic leaders. And when he revealed that in Messiah of Dune, people were angry because they were confronted with their own bias. And he was very deliberate in the first Dune to portray Harkonnens as villainous as possible. And he used the most signifier of the time to make him gay and to make him obese. And if you remove that being gay is bad, it's not, let's remove that. Being obese is bad, let's remove that. And you're left, he's ruthless. But the world is ruthless. And it's noted that Leto Atreides, Paul's father, was also a warrior in countless battles, and they all have scars. So those are people who are constantly battling each other, and they're owning their own worlds. And it's the nature of that world to be ruthless. And we are blind to that because we follow the charismatic leader that leads us, and we are sympathetic to his troubles, and we fail to see that in the end of Dune, the jihad was released upon the all of the planets, and how Jodorowsky said he raped Herbert and the whole theater laughed. But that's the point of Dune, to release the jihad where his troops will rape the universe and spread genes across all of the planets, and it's a horrible world. And I think we can't lose sight of that, because that's why, for me, this book is so valuable, because you follow a villain and you don't know he's a villain, because he's so sure of himself. And Herbert went so far that he even used Hitler and Eva Braun as reference to Leto and Lady Jessica. He didn't marry her because he wanted to stay bachelor and be attractive to other houses, like he's open to alliances with anyone.
Frank, your thoughts on this, or maybe some other aspects?
Wow, this is really, I feel like I'm just an audience member watching. That's fascinating. I didn't know any of that. That's really incredible. Wow. I like that Leto and Lady Jessica are actually based on Hitler and Eva Braun. Wow, that's dark.
It's phrased that way, and it's the way that is phrased in documentaries about Hitler. And we, as a country, with the past we have to know our past. We have to be aware of totalitarianism and how easy it is for it to rise. Because all it takes is a charismatic leader and an outer threat. And through the Dune book, which I read to remind myself, it's so well woven, because it's the Duke Leto who teaches Paul, we will go to Arrakis and we will implement Fremens. And he already has this plan to arm Fremens to be his army that is stronger than Sardaukar. And that alone reveals that Leto, the first, isn't an innocent man victim. He had a full plan how to overthrow the emperor and become the emperor. That's his plan.
Any comments from the audience? Questions? About the novel, about the movies, about the TV series? Not for the moment. No. Okay. The novel was also criticized from the post-colonial and feminist perspectives. I don't know what are your thoughts about.
For that.
You came prepared, great.
But it's an interesting thing, because feminism of Herbert is the thing I, of course, thought about for decades. And I just came to a realization what my answer is yesterday. And my answer is that he's a top feminist, the best feminist you can find. Because the hidden protagonist of Dune Saga and the main heroes of the Dune Saga are Bene Gesserit, and they are the victors of the Dune Saga. They are the protagonist after Leto II dies. And it's not worth noting that Leto II dies of the hand of a woman, and he's quite happy about it, because Leto II took the golden path to become the god emperor that lives for centuries, because he hoped that he will experience surprise, that he will experience something that he didn't foretold, and his death was a surprise to him, and he died a happy man, warm. So in the end, the Bene Gesserit were hated by Paul, who I already established is not really a hero, and he was hated by them just for one test. They put him through one test, and he hated him his whole life. And the test was he human or not, and he refused their definition of a human, and Leto II also refused their definition of human and became a monster for them to see, and he became a tyrant. For what reason? To teach the humanity the horrors of being under a tyrant, and being such a terrible tyrant that generations to come will be self-sufficient, and when the machines can return, that the humanity won't be extinct. The whole point of Dune was survival, for humans not to get extinct.
Frank?
What can I add to that? Don't even look at me. Go next. Ay, ay, ay.
No, I was thinking maybe from your reading of the book, some aspects that you find interesting, maybe that were not represented in the movies or TV series or other things.
It's been a while since I read it. I read it at the start of making the documentary. So that was 2010, 2011. I remember reading the book and thinking, like, how the hell do you make a movie out of this? Everything is just people thinking at each other. It's insane. That's really what I remember. But now, I mean, after this conversation, now I kind of want to go back and read it again and start reading the other ones. How many should I go? Where is the point where it's like, stop?
I read all Frank's book. And for me, I know that some say that the first one is the best one, the style, the everything. But for me, it's just one big book. It has one theme, and he didn't finish it. And
just Frank's books you recommend?
I read just Frank's books. I still didn't get over the fact that Brian is writing books. I'm sorry. I will probably get around to reading them, but that's the future for me still. And I have some of those books that I put out to the future because I'm always afraid that I won't have good books to read.
Okay, I just remembered that I forgot to say what was my first encounter with the Dune universe, and it was actually through a video game from 1992. My father was playing it. I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. The game was from 1992, I think. And so I just sat by him, and he started to interpret the game for me. Basically, there are two major Dune games. The first one was very artistic, was made by a French studio, and was graphically astonishing for the time. And it was an interactive adventure game with a lot of dialogues and a lot of talking with the NPCs. And basically that was my first encounter. After it, I saw Lynch's movie, and then I read the book and all that. Maybe to relate to that, to say a few words about this multimedia or transmedia potential of the Dune. It obviously spread through illustration. It inspired many great science fiction writers. It was also present in board games and video games. But Frank Herbert's association or Frank Herbert's estate was for a very long time rather conservative in dealing with the IP and so for a very long time there was basically nothing about the Dune. And now we have an explosion. Of course, the second film by Villeneuve is already announced. Several board games, video games are coming. Merchandise is already here. I don't know what you think about it. Do you think that it has potential to become a new Marvel or DC franchise or not? And did you have any experience with all these multimedia aspects of the Dune? Frank, maybe?
I've never been a video game guy, so I didn't even, I've never kind of grew up with games. I'd heard that there was a video game, but I don't think I've ever met anybody who was introduced to Dune by a video game. So
I'm a little bit younger than you, so.
He's young. We'll forgive him. I never played the games of Dune, but the merchandise. We are living in the post-Marvel world. We are living in the Disney universe right now, and everything is about the merchandise. And I don't see anything bad about it, because there's money to be earned, and it can go all to big pharma. The artists need to earn a living too, and I look forward to figurines. I'm always open to receiving figurines.
I remember when Lynch's Dune was made, for some reason, they thought it was going to be like the next Star Wars, and they thought it was going to be for kids. Like, I found a picture once online somewhere that they made Dune bed sheets, like children's sheets for a bed. Like, do these people know who David Lynch is? Have they ever read the book? This is not a story for children. This is like horror and terror. And it's like, no, there were Dune coloring books for kids made for the David Lynch thing. This is insanity. This is complete insanity.
Anyone who saw a Lynch's movie should know better.
No, right? Exactly.
We are going to seek one color book with Baron Harkonnen for you.
No.
Any question? Yes, a question there.
I have a question, but I have a statement.
Sure, please.
I don't know if you know that David Lynch was actually approached by George Lucas to do Return of the Jedi. That he was approached first to do Star Wars and then to do Dune. So there is some connection. And my question is regarding Simov's foundation. Do you see any similarities between Leto II and the mule from the foundation? Do you see some, I don't know, connection, similarities? Anyone?
I guess it's a question for all of us. Yeah, okay. So, do we see any similarities between the mule from the foundation and Eucrates, right?
I'm sorry.
Leto II, okay, Leto II and the mule from foundation. Parallels. Do we see any parallels?
My read of Foundation should be replenished, and I did never see the connection, and I didn't start to see the series yet. I'm reluctant because I hear that it's more of a fan fiction than adaptation. So the difference between fan fiction and adaptation should be somewhere established, because it's one to adapt the book and make few moderations to make the story more visually appealing, and it's another to stray so far away from the source material to become a completely another thing. I wrote fan fiction. I'm not criticizing. I just say that there needs to be a line somewhere.
My take is a little bit different, also in very general terms. I saw the TV series, I'm following it. So the problem with Foundation, Foundation is from the classical golden age era of science fiction, when basically all the characters were just the bearers of ideas. Okay, so there was not...
Especially with Asimov.
Especially
with Asimov, you just have dry text and scientific ideas, and that's what you're left with after you read the book. The characters just fade away in the background, and all that is left is Selden. And that's it.
Yeah. And so in the adaptation, my problem is not that it is basically a variation on the theme or on the subject and not precisely adaptation. My problem is that the characters are rather void. I think that the design of the series is very well done. It's interesting, but it's boring as hell. And it's boring because, although Jared Harris is a great actor, but he's very, very...
I would probably watch it just to see Lee Pace moving, because he's grand.
Yeah, okay.
But the most...
Actually, the Emperors are a good idea. The clones are the idea that wasn't in the novels, but it's a good idea, and they function well. Only them, when it comes to character.
I have the sense that he will be grand to watch, because he's such an actor that he brings this flair and he has this dignity, and I just love to watch him perform. And I think that's with Dune adaptations as well. We had different actors playing the same roles, and the charisma is more often the selling point than not. And the casting is quite difficult to nail. And I think that's what Marvel does really good. They nail the characters, and I think that's what Jodorowsky tried to do with his Dune. He didn't seek out actors. He sought out people who were personification of the characters from the book. And he himself was a personification of Duke Leto. He is a charismatic leader. And watching the documentary, I felt for him, but I'm not, as a fan, not quite sure would I go along with the ride with him, because he is a charismatic leader, as you mentioned, crazy and charismatic, and it can be easily seen. Anyone can be charmed by such a person. He will he will surely see the story from the point of the hero, and it's visible that he considers Paul an ultimate hero, because it's everything a charismatic leader should be. And for me, the director should always have a step back from Dune and see it for what it is, and not to make it into this thing that should mesmerize people, to forget what are they seeing.
Okay, Frank?
Well, I can't speak about Foundations because I have not read it, nor have I seen it. But thinking about casting, that reminds me that just yesterday I was speaking with the publisher from Humanoids, which is the publishing company that does the Incal and did most of the Jodorowsky comic books and Mobius books, and he's friends with Villeneuve. So I said to him, "Well, now that Dune, the sequel is happening, we all know who should play the Emperor." right?
Yes.
There's only one choice. And so my friend goes, but Jodorowsky, he'll never do it. He'll never do it.
Why not? It would be a marvelous idea.
I said, what if, we were talking about this, and he was going to talk to Villeneuve about it.
He would basically become Dali.
Yeah. And I said, that's what we said. They said he should be paid, however much money per minute used, so he can truly become the highest paid actor in the world.
That would be so marvelous. It would be the greatest
it could be
joke
incredible.
in the universe.
I don't know. I think it could be amazing.
So in the end, you do have big expectations from the following movie by Villeneuve.
If it can be Alejandro, sure, absolutely, definitely.
And it would make up for one mistake that every Dune adaptation makes. The Emperor wouldn't be just a wooden chair standing there in the background doing little, because he has so few lines and he's in such a short scene that he doesn't have much room to shine. And you really need someone truly charismatic to make the space filled with his presence. And that is in the book, that the whole space was filled with his presence. He was such a charismatic person.
That's Jodorowsky. To me, that's you just explained Jodorowsky, so I'm all for it.
I think this discussion speaks volumes about the differences of the two media. How you can do something in the book, in the novel, but when you're thinking about the movie, you have to approach it in a different way.
It's a very different thing. I was once told that my novel, The Passage for the Wild, that is published in Croatian, is like you're watching a movie. And I think that because of that, I'm lacking as a writer. I'm not on the level Herbert is. And you should always be aware of your shortcomings. Because I too did grow up on visual medium, and I'm more thinking in pictures, how would that look, than how... but it's the combination between perspectives. What I took from Herbert, I will finally answer it. I took perspectives. I took the polyphony, because that's the aspect of the book that I like the most. I just love that sense that you can change your camera view, that you can switch your perspective and give the microphone to another person. And just let them tell their story from their point of view. And if you avoid the obvious things like giving things that people perceive as negative per se to people that you perceive as negative in the book, and you're giving your audience the chance to establish for themselves who is the hero. Alejandro would probably battle me, and with right, that the Pole is the hero. And of course, for him, the Pole is the hero, because he has that type of a personality. And each person has a different set of personality traits, and to allow people to enter the book and choose their hero, like in How I Met Your Mother, Barney Stinson thought that the blonde kid was the hero of the Karate Kid. And I found that so, yes, of course. Who else would be the hero for the little conceited blonde guy? So I think that's what I want to bring to my writing. The sense to take away that imperialistic, like you said, notion that the whole history should be watched from one standpoint, and that we are the one who have the moral right to judge others. And for me, reading Dune is always a cautious thing, because you have to keep in mind that Dune is written from an imperialistic standpoint. So for me, Herbert is against slavery. He's against misogyny. But he wrote his book from an imperialistic point of view to show us how easily we are swayed by the perspective, how our sense of the world is swayed by the way the history is told. And the victor always tells the story to make the loser seems villainous. If he didn't, we would be compassionate towards the loser, because we usually are.
That was very well put. I simply don't want to add anything to that. We have time maybe for one last question or comment. Yes?
I have a question.
Sure, go on.
Were there any scenes in in the documentary that didn't make the cut but were interesting for you to share?
Did you hear the question, Frank?
I did. Well, I can say, let's see, here's a good one. So we know in Villeneuve's Dune that what's her name? The mother,
Helen.
Not Jessica, but the Bene Gesserit.
Helen Hayam Gaius.
Right. So she's played by Charlotte Rampling in the Villeneuve movie, and Jodo also wanted Charlotte Rampling to be in his film, but he wanted her to be Lady Jessica, because we're talking 1975, right? She's much younger. So he was a big fan of Charlotte Rampling and really thought that she had, the beauty and the strength and everything to be this character. And she agreed to meet with him, and they sent her a copy of the script, and she read the script, and she got up to a scene where Beast Raban takes 2,000 soldiers into the desert, and they all pull down their pants and shit in front of Leto's home, castle, whatever it is. And Charlotte Rampling read the script and said, I am not going to be in a movie where there are 2,000 extras shitting in the desert. I want to be in a movie that people will actually see. No. And she refused to do it.
So. She was in the movie that people went to see. Yeah. That was a wise choice, I would say.
But in a historical irony, we don't see her face at all, almost.
That is an irony. Probably a karma.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe that's her karma for refusing.
Okay, so maybe one final question, comment. Yes, please.
In the beginning, Jodorowsky didn't even read the Dune, but after a while, did he actually? And what were his thoughts about the book?
Has Jodorowsky finally read the book?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a misunderstanding, I think, in the documentary. People think that he didn't read the book. He didn't read the book when he had the idea to make the movie. He said, "Oh, I want to make Dune," and then they said yes, and he said, "Oh shit, now I have to go read the book. Oh, this is going to be real." So he did read the book because he sat, as he says in the documentary, that Michel Sardou rented him a castle in France, and he was in that castle for 2 months, dedicated to, he did in addition to the storyboard book, there is a real screenplay, there's a real script that he wrote. So of course he's read the book, I'm sure, many times, because he did the adaptation, and you have to fully understand the material that you're dealing with if you're going to adapt it. And I think when he started reading it, he said, "Oh, Jesus Christ, what have I gotten myself into?" Because it's so confusing, it's so complicated. But
I would say that he was thrilled more than confused, and I would say that he was confident enough approaching the text to interfere in it. And his interventions are quite bold, the ones I wouldn't dare to do.
Right. That's Jodorowsky.
Yes, very bold.
Yes.
Did you find out how much money did they spend in pre-production? I mean, how much did it cost to do all the scripts and pictures and?
How much money did they spend in the pre-production? Nobody really knows. To be honest, nobody knows the answers to anything. They to answer your question quickly, they think that they spent around $2 million. That's what they think. But in reality, nobody knows, because when I started to make the documentary, I thought, once Alejandro agreed to be a part of it, and once Michel Sardou agreed to be a part of it, I said, "Oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to get boxes of archives and all sorts of, I bet that there's photos of all these guys working together. I bet that maybe there's even like Super 8 movie footage of them filming each other in the studios." I had all these ideas, nothing exists. Nothing. I think in the documentary, there's 3 photographs from back then. I used everything. That's all that exists. I eventually found like a very simple contact list of the main people. That's it. There's no budgets. There's nothing. There's no document. There's no receipts. God forbid anybody kept a receipt back then. This is 1970s in France, and they're all on God knows how many drugs, doing whatever. Can you imagine? They don't know what's going on. They don't know what they spent. They had no idea what they were doing. They were just making art and making incredible things. So, I don't think they were accountants. I don't think so. But they estimate $2 million. Who knows what's true?
The best part for me was the scene that Mick Jagger just approached Alejandro. That's just so legendary. To see that scene, Mick Jagger swaying through that room, it's just marvelous. And the fact that the role was played by Sting later on is also like iconic.
Yeah. It's got to be a rock and roll star. Yeah, exactly.
Sting in Speedo.
In the movie, Nicholas Winding Refn said that he's the only one who saw. Did you see Jodorowsky's Dune, and what do you feel? Who got the essence of Dune best, Lynch, Jodorowsky, or Villeneuve?
I think that Refn is the only person who truly saw it, because according to his story, he sat, in Alejandro's apartment, and Alejandro went page by page and basically told him everything and acted it out. That's the ultimate, I think. I think that's the ultimate. I got to read it. I've read the storyboard book. I've read the screenplays. I've done all of that. I think they're also different. I think that Jodorowsky he was adapting Dune, but he was also making a Jodorowsky movie. He was making his own thing, and nobody could do that except for him. I think Lynch tried to make something, but I do agree with Jodorowsky that it was the production and the producer that, pushed him down and didn't let him do what he's best at. I think the best things in Lynch's movie are the David Lynch things, like the milking of the cat, all this weird stuff that's, pure David Lynch. I think that's the most successful. And then we have Villeneuve's Dune, which is, I found it incredible. I felt transported watching it, but, to compare 2021 to 1975, it's a completely different thing. And it seems, like a very solid Villeneuve's movies feels like a very solid adaptation of the book, but it's not a Jodorowsky movie. I mean, it's dark and gray and brown. It's not colorful and, and crazy. So I just think they're 3 different things,
I would say that the new adaptation is true to the book. Because in the book, the world is not flashy. It's ordinary to them, and it's quite gritty and depressing. So I think that the tone of his movie is true to the book. Even if it's not as flashy and interesting what Jodorowsky or Lynch did. And in the end, I think that's what adaptation should do. But we all love the cult classics where the director gets playful and creates something unique that brings some other value to the medium, that adds layers to what you already have in the books. So I think that New Dune did some pieces of that. I loved the design, and I loved the technology, and ornithopters were really nice, and I like it. I just hope that the second one will bring that flair, that's little extra to stay memorable.
I mean, adaptations are tough. I mean, if you look at The Shining, which is an adaptation of a Stephen King story, and only Stephen King is the only person who would say he didn't capture what I wrote, you know,
of course,
he really changed it.
The
made it something
authors
different,
are
you know?
vain creatures, you know. It's the best the way they wrote it, and I think that Ian McKellen did it the best when the Lothar and Hobbit were adapted. He carried the book around and would say, "Oh, but it's written like this. Isn't it better if we use what he wrote? We can't do it better." And I was like, "Oh, the sweet darling." I don't know. For an author, probably Tolkien was happy in his grave.
Okay, I think, yeah, okay, and that are two questions. Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to add quickly to what you said. I saw some interview with Denis, and he also said that on the set he would carry a book.
It is shown because all the alterations he made were very subtle, and I say you really need to know the source material to see them. So it were really well woven. I had just few, no, but that's my personal, nothing grand.
I just want to ask.
Wait a second, yeah.
Who was supposed to be the cinematographer?
Of Jodorowsky's Dune? Yes. Who was supposed to be the cinematographer of Jodorowsky's Dune?
Oh,
Someone famous or?
somebody well known. Wow, I'm blanking. Oh my God, I completely forgot. They never got that far, I think, into stuff, you know, so it was never, you know, fully official, but now I have to look it up. I don't remember.
It seems like
It's a good question. It's a very good question. I completely forgot.
It seems like he was the type of a person that he just fished, like what came to his mind, he came and grabbed it, that he didn't have the full ensemble yet. It just seems like that.
Matija.
Well, do you think that, is there any possibility that Jodorowsky will be pleased with Waititi's version of Inkal?
Is there any possibility that he would be pleased?
That Jodorowsky would be pleased with Waititi's adaptation of Inkal.
I mean, he says he is. You know, he claims that he's very excited. He really likes Taika Waititi. Like, he really likes his movies. He watched them all, and he approved Taika. Without his approval, it would never.
He's a great director. He has crazy ideas, and had his independent projects. I'm confident he can do it.
Okay. So to put a sort of a forcible conclusion to all what you said, it is impossible nowadays to write and not to be informed by the cinema in this way or another, and vice versa. It is very hard to, especially if you are doing an adaptation, to make it without being informed by everything what was written, told, or shown, or I don't know, illustrated in this universe. We thank you for coming tonight. I would like to thank our guests tonight, Ms. Riva Zmajoki and Ms. Frank Pavich. Mr. Frank Pavich. Thank you. I enjoyed it quite a bit. You always like time to cover everything, but I think we opened some interesting points here tonight. And come back and at some other time here in Kinoteka for a Kontraplan, or appropriately named Countershot for today. Bye-bye. Thank you.